with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, July 18th, 2023. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, KJ Boyle, research assistant at the Revolving Door Project, on Lina Khan and why you can't trust Republican leadership on antitrust. Also on the program today, Donald Trump announces he's a target of the January 6th investigation and has 4 days to report to the grand jury. And as his pretrial hearing on the stolen documents case happens today, in Florida, the Georgia Supreme Court quashes Trump's bid to preempt the election interference indictment. So complicated. Alabama Republicans seem to be refusing the U.S. Supreme Court ruling to redraw maps to create a second majority black district. UPS starting to train scabs in an event of a strike. As Michigan Amazon workers stage the largest delivery station strike yet. Rashida Tlaib joins the progressive anti-apartheid boycott of Israeli presidential address as Joe Biden invites Netanyahu for talks. Republicans are welcoming RFK Jr. to testify on Thursday, despite the fact that his family has rejected his most recent COVID conspiracies and anti-Semitic tropes.
We get the podcast experience, but in a House committee.
There you go. Judge temporarily blocks Iowa's new abortion ban. Texas governor's border guards ordered to push small children and babies back into the Rio Grande. Feds are looking to strip Eric Adams of authority over Rikers. North Korea detains a U.S. citizen after he intentionally crosses the border. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. It is, as Emma Vigeland so eloquently states,
Newsday Tuesday.
There you go. It is Newsday Tuesday, but we do have KJ Boyle on to talk about the Lina Khan hearings. It's fascinating how this sort of like you can see in real time the Republican leadership gearing up to attack the first real, I would say, genuine antitrust regulator we've had in this country in at least decades.
Yeah.
And you can see the real-time failure of it over the course of the past like 6 weeks. It's a fascinating story and bodes well for more antitrust enforcement going forward. But before we get to that, this just broke before the show began. I don't think it's any big surprise, but Jack Smith, this is the special prosecutor who has been appointed both to investigate the stolen documents case, which today we will hear will be the first pretrial hearing, I guess, in Florida from that Trump-appointed judge. And he's also heading I guess, the Washington-based January 6th investigation, not to be confused with the sort of attempts to steal the election that took place in Georgia. And like I mentioned in the headlines, the Supreme Court of Georgia quashed Trump's bid to preempt the indictment that everybody anticipates happening within, maybe a month or so in Georgia. But Jack Smith sent notice to Donald Trump, and apparently he did it Sunday night, but Trump decided to release it today. Here is Donald Trump's announcement on Truth Social that he has gotten a target letter.
Wow.
He was very, very surprised to receive that letter.
Wow.
So shocking. But here it is. He gets the wow. On Sunday night, while I was with my family, having just arrived from the Turning Point event in Florida, we all know, of course, what he's talking about, where I won the straw poll against all other Republican candidates with 85.7, with all polls showing me leading in the Republican primary by very substantial numbers. Almost everyone predicting that I will be the Republican nominee.
Does this count as a run-on sentence? I mean, I just want to ask.
It's a run-on paragraph. And as I'm leading the Democrat Joe Biden by horrifying news for our country was given to me by my attorneys. Deranged Jack Smith, the prosecutor with Biden's DOJ, sent a letter. Again, it was Sunday night. He seems to be very pissed about the Sunday night letter.
Right. That's the whole
stating
day.
that I'm a target of the January 6th grand jury investigation and giving me a very short 4 days to report to the grand jury. So that deadline seems to be Thursday, right? I mean,
that'll give you some Sunday scaries.
Yep. Which almost means an arrest and an indictment. So now Joe Biden's Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who I turned down for United States Supreme Court, in retrospect, based on his corrupt and unethical actions of very wide. I don't know. I don't even need to read anymore. But this witch hunt is all about election interference and complete and total political weaponization of law enforcement. It's a sad and dark period for our nation. I don't know why. I really don't know why Ronald Reagan read that letter off to everybody, but there it is. So I don't know what happens, frankly, in the next 2 days. It was just breaking, but presumably he's got to. I don't know what that means in terms of report in front of the grand jury. If that means that he needs to testify, or he needs to acknowledge that he's been summoned by the grand jury, or acknowledge that he is a target in the investigation. This is more than likely. I mean, you would not have this unless they're prepared to indict him. Generally, when, not always, but often, when a grand jury is about to indict somebody, they will invite testimony from the accused. That will happen, and that sounds like what's going on here. So we will see more. But here's Marjorie Taylor Greene with her response. This was this morning in front of reporters on Capitol Hill.
Former President Trump says he received a letter from Jack Smith saying he's a target of a grand jury investigation on January 6th. Do you have a reaction to that?
Yeah, it's absolute bullshit. Yeah, that's my reaction. This is the only way that the Democrats have to beat President Trump, is to arrest him, smear him, charge him with ridiculous charges, all in a cover-up of Joe Biden's crimes, Hunter Biden's crimes. It's unbelievable. It's hard to even recognize that this is our country. The American people are going to be furious. And what Jack Smith is doing is the weaponized government. And he's weaponizing the Department of Justice against President Trump in a complete lie about President Trump and January 6th. And it's outrageous. I can't believe our country has to endure this. And I'll be standing with President Trump the entire way.
Have you spoken to him since this?
I have not spoken with him yet, but I'm sure I'll be talking with him very soon.
Given the fact that this is not the first time that he's been the target of one of these investigations, do you find this one to be more serious?
Yes, I find it to be more serious because the charges they're looking at bringing against him, they arrested people on January 6th. They held them pre-trial. They never let them out on bail. And is the question that I want to ask Jack Smith, is this the plan? Are they going to arrest President Trump? Trump charge him with phony, fake charges and then hold him in prison while he is winning the Republican primary, while he's going to win the general election in 2024? Is this where our country is now? Because it's an embarrassment on the world stage. If this is the direction America is going in, we are worse than Russia. We are worse than China. We are worse than some of the most corrupt third world countries. And this needs to end.
She came out swinging.
There you go.
I'm the American Lula.
Yeah, I don't know what. So.
Libertad. Trump livre.
Trump livre. I just feel like there is, diminishing returns politically for these indictments at this point within the Republican primary. Because, this doesn't even register. They all think it's a part of one whole witch hunt. And it's like the more that they try, the more that, the more they cut off one Hydra's head, the more, three heads grow back or something like that.
That's a great point, because what is happening on the other sort of end of that ledger is that there are multiple like legit charges against him, and each new one doesn't necessarily help him, although he'll try and he'll fundraise off it, but it doesn't necessarily help his numbers anymore. I don't think it hurts him at all, but it doesn't help him. But you'd rather be facing one criminal charge as opposed to, let's say, 2 or 3 or maybe 4. That is, I think,
gotta catch them all.
And he's running out of lawyers. I just don't think he can actually literally get lawyers. But the other point about like the one-headed Hydra, Greg Sargent wrote a piece about this in the Washington Post yesterday or today. Part of the reason why they can't get any traction on their conspiracy theories is that there's so many of them.
Yeah.
And every Republican seems to have their like favorite one that needs to be serviced. So they can't coalesce around one narrative, right? Like, there's like, I'm trying to follow how many witnesses are missing in which part of the investigation about Hunter Biden. And are we talking about what Hunter Biden did, or is it what Joe Biden did, or the other members of the Biden crime family? Or is it really just about the suppression of the story about Biden? Is it China, or is it Burisma? Is it, and just literally scratch the surface. There's just simply too many cooks in the kitchen in terms of the conspiracies, because they all have their favorite ones.
What's canon?
Exactly. No, someone asked me actually the other day, like, can you explain QAnon to me? And I said, well, there's no canon.
Yeah.
It's just everybody's got their own sort of flavor. It's fascinating. But in a moment, we're going to talk to KJ Boyle. He's a research assistant at the Revolving Door Project, about Lina Khan. This is another, a Jim Jordan, who's in charge of like, I don't know, like 25% of the conspiracy portfolio, was leading this, attempt at Lina Khan. It didn't work out so well, again, because there was sort of like attempts to create a scandal there with her that fell flat on its face. But before we get there, just a reminder that the Majority Report is not just a podcast. We have actually a retail aspect of our program. That's right. Of course, I'm talking about shop.majorityreportradio.com. That's where we sell merch. And we do it on the Shopify commerce platform. It has revolutionized millions of businesses worldwide. It doesn't matter whether you're a garage entrepreneur, as they say, sort of like, I guess, what we are. We technically started in a closet, but or if you are like IPO ready, Shopify is the only tool you need to start, to run, and grow your business without the struggle. Shopify puts you in control of every sales channel. If you sell your merch, for instance, like we do at live shows when we have them, we haven't booked one in a while. We got to do that. But yes, you mentioned that to me actually. But the point is, you can integrate your in real life sales with your online sales, and you're all covered essentially. Doesn't matter what you're offering on Shopify's all-in-one commerce platform. You are covered. And once you've reached your audience, Shopify has the internet's best converting checkout to help you turn them from browsers into buyers. Shopify also integrates with all social media platforms, Instagram, YouTube. I don't know. Did people still use Pinterest?
Pinterest, yes.
Pinterest. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. They power Allbirds, which is that sneaker thing, and Rothy's, and millions of others of entrepreneurs, every size, across over 170 countries. And they have award-winning help. Shopify does will help support your success at every step of the way. This is Possibility powered by Shopify. For me, obviously our merch is not a huge part of this, but for forever, I was reluctant to sell merch because I'm like, we're not going to be able to put stuff up in a timely manner. It's going to be too complicated. I'm going to have to hire a special merch person and this and that. Shopify made it super easy. And we pop up, shirts and different merch ideas as soon as we get them, integrated in, super easy. And if we actually grew as a merch enterprise or anything else, Shopify would make it super easy for us to do that too. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/majority. That's all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/majority. Take your business to the next level today. Shopify.com/majority. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, KJ Boyle, research assistant at the Revolving Door Project. Right back. We are back. Sam Seder, Emma Vigland on the Majority Report. Want to welcome to the program KJ Boyle. He is a research assistant at the Revolving Door Project. Also want to welcome his dog, who is a stalwart supporter of antitrust and making that known right now. KJ, welcome to the program.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thanks for having my dog as well.
Well, anytime. We're pet friendly show. I hope the dog is not attacking anybody at the moment. All right, let's. Lina Khan at the Federal Trade Commission. We had interviewed her a couple of times years ago when she was a professor writing about things like antitrust. Give us a sense so far. Aside from like the stat that I'm most familiar with is that the Wall Street Journal has written about her like something like 63 times in op-eds over the past 2 years, which is an astonishing number. But give us a sense of like what she has done relative to Federal Trade Commission chairs in the past.
Yeah, so I think the Wall Street Journal has actually gotten up to about 70 op-eds.
Whoa, all right.
Yeah, they're still on it. So yeah, Lina Khan's leadership of the FTC has kind of flipped that agency's reputation around. Since the 80s, it's kind of been known as a place for revolving door figures to go from corporate law to government regulation back to corporate law. But since her tenure, it's sort of shifted the antitrust landscape. So now corporations know that there's a person in charge that will not just wave through their mergers and will not just settle for settlements and divestitures and will actually challenge these mergers. Prior to Khan, something like 75% of the top FTC officials in the past 2 decades have revolved back and forth between the FTC and corporate law. So under Khan's leadership, that's changing, and it's having tangible effects on the economy.
She has the interesting thing is, and they tried to make an issue of this in the hearings over the past week, and they were questioning her, that she is 0 for 4 in some of her suits to stop mergers, which of course does not count the mergers that didn't happen because she was the idea that I think these companies realize like we're going to lose any scrutiny here. But the thing that strikes me is about the value of losing. I remember interviewing Jesse Essinger. I think his name was I think it was Jesse Essinger, who wrote this book. I think he's writing for ProPublica now. But he wrote a book called the Chicken Shit Club, which was about the DOJ going after white collar criminals, but also it was broadly about these type of enforcement actions. And they were very afraid of losing in any type of situation. So they would err on the side of not bringing cases. And in some way, we're seeing the value of even bringing losing cases by the FTC, in that it has what I think, those of us who are supportive of antitrust, a chilling effect on the attempts of these companies to become monopolies.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Republicans will like to harp on that 0 for 4 stat, but as you said, it leaves out not only mergers that have not even been attempted, but also, there's been mergers that they file for an initial merger. Lockheed Martin, for example, tried to have a $4 billion acquisition of a rocket engine company, and then the FTC asked for additional information, and Lockheed Martin decided to drop that acquisition. So even some of these firms will initially attempt, and once Lina Khan and the FTC show some increased scrutiny, they drop it because they know that their cases will not win in court. So the 0 for 4, it doesn't look good on its face, but there's a lot more that the FTC does beyond those court cases. And it should be said that the FTC's budget and amount of employees that they've had for the past 40 years and for the past decade, the budget has been relatively stagnant, and they're going up against these multi-billion-dollar corporations, and only have 1,100 employees and $430 million to take on these companies that have endless amounts of cash.
But nevertheless, I mean, I think as indicative of the Wall Street Journal, this record-breaking number of op-eds, I honestly think that it's probably a record of any sort of cabinet. I mean, even a cabinet position, never mind the FTC, a cabinet position getting named this many times. I mean, we're, 2.5 years into, I don't know when she got confirmed, but I don't think it wasn't right away. It wasn't even, actually, it was relatively recently. I mean, as it goes, I don't think she sat, for maybe even the first year. And to have 60, you think about how many business days there are, how many op-eds they pump out. It seems like
I just want to add too, if you just do a quick Google search, especially before this recent, hearing, it's not just the Wall Street Journal, the Times, the framing of it is negative. Bloomberg, obviously the framing of it is negative. I mean, it's really difficult. When I was, looking up the subject of this hearing, with the ethics violation she was accused of, which was essentially just her having an antitrust ideology, you have to go to different articles to find what is the ethics violation that's being accused of here. Not to jump too far ahead, but the framing of her from a media perspective across the board is just negative.
Yeah, I mean, it's really ridiculous the amount of times that the business press will write about her in that fashion. But it just goes to show, like you said, that she is doing a good job. You can judge federal officials by the enemies they make, and if you're pissing off the Wall Street Journal and business press broadly, and Republicans like Jim Jordan, you're doing a good job. You're making the right enemies.
What's also fascinating about the hearings this week is that in many ways, all of those reports, all of those op-eds were supposedly going to culminate in last week. I mean, this was, this is what it was building to. And you wrote a piece at the Revolving Door Project. I should also say you've been writing some at the American Prospect as well. But take us in the run up to this, because it starts in the first or second week of June with a piece that announces what in Bloomberg News.
Yeah, so I mean, really, the whole project goes back since Lina Khan's appointment. Republicans have this entire time been trying to undermine, her leadership, her reputation. But this specific case was back in February or last year. The FTC challenged Meta's acquisition of Within, which is a VR app development company. And in that case, Meta petitioned to have Lina Khan recuse herself, as Emma said, because of basically having a view of antitrust.
I mean, literally, it was because she wrote a law review article.
Yes.
Espousing a perspective on antitrust that this is the way I think antitrust should be. If you have, and I imagine it had to do with vertical integration, if you have a company like Meta purchase a essentially a potential competitor and sort of integrate them into the company, the argument always has been, or I should say has recently been over the past maybe 5 or 6, 7, 8 years, that we should return to the perspective of antitrust that existed before Reagan adopted Robert Bork's view of antitrust. It went from, the Teddy Roosevelt trust busting of, what's good for the consumer is one part of it, but also what is good for competition, because the more competition you have within the context of an industry, the wider the opportunity is spread across essentially the population, and also, is it good just for society at large to have this type of monopolistic concentration. Under Bork, it was just shrunk down to, will it provide cheaper prices for the consumer? And a lot of times they would predict that it would, and it didn't, but that was less the issue, as more of just like having a low bar on what the definition was of it not being an antitrust violation. She espoused this. So Meta, to try and thwart the FTC's enforcement action, basically lodges an ethics complaint and says, she's written about this before, so it's unfair because she's thought about these issues.
Yeah, so that was their argument, which obviously it's absurd on its face, but Lina Khan went through, the process, talked to an ethics official and got verbal advice. And the ethics official advised her that it is not a legal violation to have an opinion and still participate in the case. Obviously, she does not have any financial interest, which is what one usually thinks of when they think of like an ethics violation or a conflict of interest. And then, so that was back in February. Fast forward to a month ago, in the middle of June, Bloomberg publishes a memo from that ethics official, L'Oreal Pankey, which was a memo that Lina Khan did not see. It was not the memo that gave her the advice. It was a memo written at the behest of and addressed to former FTC Commissioner Christine Wilson, who spent the last 2 years of her time on the commission pursuing this project of undermining Lina Khan as the leader of the FTC. And in that letter, which the business press liked to seize on the fact that there could be a reasonable or appearance of concern of an ethics violation, but it also said that there is not a legal, there was no legal requirement for Khan to recuse herself. And the commission voted, a judge agreed that Khan did not have to recuse herself from this case. But, the business press ran with it anyway.
Well, I mean, it sounds to me like the memo was completely manufactured. Like the former member of the FTC who was pissed about Lina Khan said to the ethics, can you write me a memo that says,
right.
That she violated ethics? No, I can't, because she didn't. Not legally, but I could say that theoretically one could recuse oneself if one felt that one had already, involved themselves in this, writes the memo so that it can be leaked to the press in the run-up to Lina Khan's hearings, so that they have a story that metastasizes or so that the hearings were then scheduled just shortly after that thing came out. Ostensibly a coincidence, or was it supposedly about the potential ethics violation?
Yeah, I mean, Jim Jordan had been building up to this hearing anyway, but then, a week after the memo was published, it was announced that Khan would be testifying last week, and then about 2 weeks after the memo was published, Jim Jordan and Kathy Rogers sent a letter to Lina Khan highlighting the Twitter stuff that you guys covered yesterday, and also this memo claiming that she supposedly lied to Congress by saying that she never went against an ethics official's advice.
And then, and I want to get to that Twitter stuff, and just so you can outline it for us just a little bit more precisely. The Wall Street Journal publishes a piece that was based upon the investigation that you guys did. I imagine you were part of this, if not the person who did it, that found that the ethics official who recommended or said, like, you could recuse yourself from this Meta case, actually ended up owning stock.
Yeah.
I mean, this is ridiculous.
It's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's absurd. I got to give credit to my colleague, Andrea. She's the one who pulled the disclosures of L'Oreal Pankey, who, as you said, owned anywhere from 15,000 and currently owns anywhere from 15,000 to 50,000 dollars worth of Meta stock when she's making this recommendation that Lina Khan should recuse herself, despite having no financial interest in the matter. I mean,
well,
it's ridiculous, and that in itself could be an actual legal ethics violation on behalf of the.
Let's play this clip of Republican Ken Buck from Colorado, basically saying to Jim Jordan, take a a long walk off a short pier. Buck seems to actually genuinely care about antitrust, and at the very least is not going to embarrass himself with this attempt by Jim Jordan to make it seem like Khan has done something wrong. But here it is. This is a great exchange.
Chair Khan, thank you for being here. Do you own stock in Apple, Amazon, Facebook, or Google?
No.
Do you own stock in any of the competitors to those companies?
I do not.
Do you know that the ethics official who requested that you recuse yourself from any activities involving Facebook owned stock in Facebook?
I learned about that, yes.
Do you know how much it costs to buy Congress? Well, big tech does. They spent $250 million against the bills that passed out of this committee last Congress. They spent money lobbying. They spent money on advertising in members' districts. They spent money with third-party think tanks. They spent money that no other effort in recent memory certainly has been spent. And it's not just the money that they spent, but on lobbying, for example, Meta spent, and I call it Facebook, $20,070,000, Amazon $19,320,000, Alphabet $11,770,000, Apple $6,500,000.
So there it is. I mean, that's the exchange there that really left not much ground to go after Lina Khan. And for the most part, the rest of the hearing was actually sort of relatively substantive, it seemed like, about these things. Jim Jordan did bring up, like, how dare the FTC require, reporters, what reporters Twitter gave the Twitter files to or exchanged there. But that was literally because Twitter had signed a consent order a couple of years ago saying that anytime we share any information with a third party, we will let you know. This is, it's privacy issue. That's a relatively standard thing that happens, right? It's just not with the conservative, like, hero of the day, Elon Musk.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they were mad that Lina Khan and the FTC had the audacity to enforce a consent decree that Twitter itself, signed on to in 2011. And since then, issues yearly reports to the FTC to show that they are still in compliance with those privacy practices. And yeah, like you said, they gave journalists access to people's private information, apparently with the Twitter files. And not only that, when Musk came on, they did all these layoffs of a legal team, of engineers, compliance, like that degrades the infrastructure, like Twitter's infrastructural ability to comply with this consent decree, because it takes a lot of, people and expertise to ensure that they're in accordance with it.
And lastly, in terms of like Khan's integrity, I enjoyed this exchange again with Buck, because to the extent that we've had any type of legislation that has come out that would in any way curtail the size of these massive entities. I mean, big tech is a catchword. I would like to do this with a lot of industries, frankly, but was sort of went nowhere in the Senate, the democratically controlled Senate, if I remember correctly from the last term. And Ken Buck reminds us as to why.
In activities involving some of these companies, because you wrote a law review article. you have a child? I don't want you to answer that question just yet because that's personal. But do you have a child who is lobbying for Amazon or Facebook?
No, he's turning 6. He's turning 6 months this week, so no.
Okay.
They'd probably still hire him.
Yeah. If they thought they could influence you, they would hire your child at 6 months old because, in fact, they've hired Senator Schumer's daughters to lobby for them. And the same bills that passed the House didn't get a chance. I'm sorry. The same bills that passed the House Judiciary Committee passed the Senate Judiciary Committee and never saw the light of day on the Senate floor either. But that's just how the game goes. You're well aware of the need to update the antitrust laws concerning the new economy that we are facing. And I'd just like you, if you could, briefly to explain what is the need? Why is it so difficult to apply antitrust laws written at the turn of the last century to the new economy?
Thanks, Congressman. So there is antitrust doctrine on the books that has embedded within it certain economic assumptions about how certain markets work, about what types of incentives businesses face. That doctrine in some cases is 30 years, 40 years old, way before we had the advent of digital markets. These digital markets function differently, right? You have the self-reinforcing advantages of data, network externalities, companies face different incentives, they're engaged in different strategies, and sometimes there can just be a gap between how the doctrine is saying businesses are acting and what we see in reality. And so legislative updates can be needed to close that gap between what the theory says or what the doctrine says and what we're all living with in actual markets. And so that's in particular where legislative action can be absolutely critical.
I mean, I like both parts of that. I like the fact that we're reminded that Chuck Schumer stepped all over this legislation, and I like the fact that there's an opportunity to explain, like the doctrinal, the structure of antitrust is still there and still functional, but as it applies to a evolved type of business practices, this would become another tool that would make it easier, frankly, for the FTC to go to court.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
to without having to sort of like extend the doctrine to you know, and essentially fill in this gap through reasoning. It'd be much easier to have it just as statutory. And Chuck Schumer, I guess, I don't know, around the dinner table, maybe just was convinced that we don't need this type of thing. So let me ask you this lastly. Now that she seems to have like essentially run the gauntlet that Jim Jordan, and to be fair, there's a couple of Republicans on that committee who clearly do care about antitrust laws. This is, you know, to the extent that there is a, and I guess maybe it's because the woke mind virus can't infect antitrust because of some type of enzymes, or I'm not exactly sure what it is, but this is actually a committee where you have several Republicans who genuinely do care about antitrust, and as long as they're not, you know, as long as that topic stays not sexy, I think that that support will remain. But now that Khan has been able to run this gauntlet of trying to attack her for some type of bias or you know, whatever it is, do you anticipate more aggressiveness, the same? I mean, where does the FTC head now?
Yeah, I mean, I think as far as Khan goes, her mission will not change. She'll keep doing what she's doing, but you know, you can hope that some Republicans will, you know, come to the side of Buck. And Matt Gaetz had some comments as well in the hearing that were supportive of the FTC. But you know, for the most part, the Republican constituency is big business and corporations. You know, they will continue to fight against Lina Khan and for that constituency. And I do just want to mention, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. It's not just legislators that have siblings or children working for these corporations. In the FTC's case that they just lost against Microsoft, the judge of that case, her son works for Microsoft. And we actually sent a letter to that judge asking for her recusal, which obviously did not happen. So, these issues are widespread, as we've seen many ethics concerns across the judicial system.
Pro tip: if you want to get a job at one of these companies, you may want to imply that your parent is a federal judge or somehow affiliated with lawmaking. KJ Boyle, thanks so much for the work you guys are doing over at the Revolving Door Project. I really appreciate it. Folks should check that out. We'll put a link to the Revolving Door Project. Doing really great work over there. Nobody else would have done this investigation into what this ethics person, them not recusing themselves from determining the ethics based upon their holdings in the company that they were ruling on. It's just, I think, just too perfect. But KJ Boyle, thanks so much for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay, folks, before we end the fun half, the free half of the program, I just want to, this story from Texas is just so appalling.
Unreal.
You'll recall that Governor Abbott made a big show of a new border enforcement, essentially patrolling an initiative. And apparently, the word's not used in the Houston Chronicle, but it really does feel like this is there's a whistleblower. I don't know if the trooper himself blew the whistle.
Right.
Certainly sent an email to a superior. This is a state trooper. I'm just going to read parts of this again. This is from the Houston Chronicle because it's just so disturbing and
indicative of the effectiveness of how we've just dehumanized migrants, just so systemically, and the Republican Party in particular.
Officers working for Governor Greg Abbott's border security initiative have been ordered to push small children and nursing babies back into the Rio Grande River and have been told not to give water to asylum seekers, even in extreme heat. And we are going through some of the hottest days on record on the planet. Texas is sweltering. I think Phoenix has now set a record for 10 days above 110 degrees. So that whole region, just to be clear, is it is on fire.
And I just want to say this comes as Greg Abbott overturned laws in, I believe, Dallas and Austin. I could be getting the cities wrong, but two of the major cities in Texas that had put in place mandatory water breaks for construction workers after 4 hours. Those are primarily migrants in Texas. So this is like another effort by Greg Abbott in particular to make sure that migrants are thirsty and without water.
Water to asylum seekers, even extreme heat. This is according to an email from a Department of Public Safety trooper who described the actions as inhumane. The July 3 account, so this is just from a week or two ago, reviewed by Hearst newspapers, discloses several previously unreported incidents the trooper witnessed in Eagle Pass, where the state of Texas has strung miles of razor wire and deployed a wall of buoys in the Rio Grande. According to the email, a pregnant woman having a miscarriage was found late last month caught in the wire, doubled over in pain. A 4-year-old girl passed out from heat exhaustion after she tried to go through it and was pushed back by the Texas National Guard soldiers. A teenager broke his leg trying to navigate the water around the wire and had to be carried by his father. The email, which the trooper sent to a superior, suggests that Texas set traps of razor wire wrapped barrels in parts of the river. Just contemplate what's going on here. They have taken razor wire. They have wrapped it around barrels. They have basically sunk these barrels halfway in the river with high water and low visibility. This is, of course, where people walk across. And says the wire has increased the risk of drownings by forcing migrants into deeper stretches of the river. Due to extreme heat, the order to not give people water needs to be immediately reversed as well, the trooper wrote, later adding, I believe we've stepped over a line into the inhumane. The piece goes on to say federal border patrols have issued internal warnings that the razor wire is preventing their agents from reaching at-risk migrants and increasing the risk of drownings in the Rio Grande. The trooper's email sheds new light on a series of previously reported drownings in the river during a one-week stretch earlier this month, including a mother and at least one of her two children who federal border patrols spotted struggling to cross the Rio Grande on July 1st. According to the email, a DPS boat found the mother and one of the children who went under the water for a minute. They were pulled from the river and given medical care before being transferred to EMS, but were later declared deceased at the hospital. The second child was never found. I mean, we talk about Russians putting mines in Ukraine. This is what this is. They don't explode. They just cause people to drown.
After being lacerated.
Just unbelievable. On June 30th, troopers found a group of people along the wire, including a 4-year-old girl who had tried to cross the wire and was pressed back by Texas Guard soldiers due to the orders given to them. That's the quote, the email says. The DPS trooper wrote that the temperature was well over 100 degrees and the girl passed out from exhaustion. In another instance, on June 25th, troopers came across a group of 120 people camped out along a fence set up by the river. The group included several small children and babies who were nursing, the trooper wrote. The entire group was exhausted, hungry, and tired, according to the trooper. The shift officer in command ordered the troopers to push the people back into the Rio Grande River to go back to Mexico. The trooper wrote that the troopers decided it was not the right thing to do, quote, with the very real potential of exhausted people drowning. They called command again and expressed their concerns, and then were given the order to tell them to go to Mexico and get in our vehicle and leave. After they left, other troopers worked with Border Patrol to provide care to the migrants, the email said. I mean, this is just horrific.
Yeah. Between
it's a war. It is a crime against humanity.
100%.
It's turning these National Guards and Doug Burgum, who's running for president now, signed an executive order saying, "Oh yeah, we'll give you some National Guards people if you want to go help, I guess, push mothers into razor wire in the Rio Grande." Like, think of what it's doing. Not only like the brutality, but like we're creating like extremist death squads. Because for all the people who are going to blow the whistle on this stuff, I mean, I don't know if that's going to be the natural response of these guys.
I mean, we talked about this within the context of terrorism against the United States, right? Or what recruitment entails, essentially, where what we do in our brutality, it does not just evaporate, right? These stories become what the United States represents on the global stage. Yeah. And there's absolutely no chance that these stories of brutality don't resonate with the people these are human beings that have families and friends that are going to hear this kind of stuff. And it's not like they're just waltzing over the border. They're coming here and risking severe maiming and death for a better life. And this is what is met for them here.
Until like we have a party that says like actually we can fit more people here, we need to just process them faster. Like the Republicans are going to keep pushing more and more into like until we're just shooting AKs across the Rio Grande at people. Like we need an affirmative. Actually, yeah, we can have migrants come here, and yes, we're going to protect them. We're going to give people labor protection so bosses can't exploit them and that sort of thing. But like we can't. I don't know where is Biden on this, right? Like that's like people are wondering.
Title 40, sad about Title 42 ending.
And people are wondering why this isn't like a bigger thing. It's because Trump isn't president still.
Right. And the policies are not materially different from the Trump administration.
Yeah.
And we had a guest on about Guatemala last week, and I know a lot of the migrants coming over are from Haiti as well. This is also the result of U.S. empire and interference and our toppling of governments in order to put puppets in place in countries in Central Latin America, and then in Haiti, of course, our history of exploitation there. Like it's incredible that we, and honestly, it's fitting though that we started in these countries with brutality, and then we meet them with brutality when they come here.
It's reprehensible, and we should be clear. When you talk about Guatemala, when you talk about Honduras, and essentially us running the Contras and the right-wing death squads out of Honduras, essentially to go back into El Salvador and to Guatemala. One of the guys, I think, who was, I don't know, I can't remember if he was, I think he was a State Department official at the time, who wanted to provide aid to the dictator in Guatemala at the time. This is, I think, early 80s. Elliot Abrams was just appointed, and it was a right. Largely, and this happened while I was on vacation, largely a ceremonial position. And so it, supposedly the Biden administration was like, you can't do anything materially, but until we symbolically, like we understand what we did to these countries, that essentially rolled them down the hill to chaos and an inability to maintain a safe civil society. Until we acknowledge that, and that being one of the primary reasons why many people from that country attempt to emigrate to the United States, we're never going to get to that point where we can talk about migrants as human beings and as on both on a humane and a policy level. And to appoint Elliot Abrams, again, if it's just a largely symbolic position, that's
more than
just as problematic.
Yeah.
Because it is the functional equivalent of putting up those statues of Confederate soldiers. I mean, there's a reason why symbolism is important in any type of society, and symbolically, what we're saying is that what we didn't do anything, that we have no responsibility for this. If we don't, at least at the very least, symbolically hold ourselves to account.
It's wild. The Elliot Abrams thing is really dark, because I remember like a few years ago when the Ilhan thing came out, and there was even people who I was following, like NatSec sort of liberal types, who were completely caught off guard that people might object to Elliot Abrams.
Yep.
And I remember Sam Fraser, who's at the Quincy Institute, reminded me of one. This is from a guy named Megson. And I worked for Elliot Abrams as a civil servant. He is a fierce advocate for human rights and democracy. Yes, he made serious professional mistakes and was held accountable. I'm a liberal, but I'm also fair. We all have a lot of work to do in Venezuela. We share goals. Like, we are so oblivious. And like Bessner's talked about this with Davison on their show recently, but we are so, that whole blob, I guess they call it now, like that is entirely brainless and completely unmoored from reality at this point.
Yeah, and I think we just also have like we memory hole so much of this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so dangerous to appoint a guy like that, to a symbolic ceremonial position, because it encourages essentially amnesia about what role you've had in the world and why certain things are happening. But all right.
Whew.
Yep, we did not finish the show early today.
No.
As soon as I said that, pre-show, I said that to Emma, and she just looked at me and she was like,
not gonna happen.
Half laughed. Folks, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajority.report.com. When you do, you not only get the free show, you get it free of commercials. You help this show survive and thrive, and you get the fun half. What could be better? It's like a win-win-win. I've said that before.
Yeah.
And today was actually, at least the majority of the show was a positive show. I mean, wasn't a doomer type of situation. What's going on with antitrust is a really important development. And, hopefully we will be in a position to maintain this type of antitrust regime for another 4 years, come 2024 into 2025, because there's nothing like 8 years of a new paradigm to stick.
Yep.
It takes time to unwind this stuff. It's easier to unwind than it is to build up, but it definitely takes time. Also, don't forget, justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Check out our merch, shop.majorityreportradio.com, shop.majorityreportradio.com. Also, Seder Seeds. If you live in a growing zone, or, I guess theoretically, if you grow inside too, cedarseeds.com, cedarsseeds.com. Emma, ESVN.
Yes.
What the hey?
We spoke about the kind of surprising lack of long-term running back contracts at the tag deadline yesterday for the NFL, what that means for that workforce, essentially. The Titans signing DeAndre Hopkins, John Gruden suing the NFL after he was ousted for racial comments that were unearthed, and Alcaraz's amazing Wimbledon win, what it means for tennis. youtube.com/ESPN show.
Matt, what's happening on Left Reckoning?
Left Reckoning will have a guest of last week, I believe it was, right? Basil Adra. David just conducted an interview with him a couple of hours ago. I was not a party of that, but tonight, and we'll also be talking about probably some RFK and Pramila Jayapal stuff. So patreon.com/Left Reckoning. David is back from London, so we've got the full crew back together tonight.
All right, folks, quick break. Fun half, 646-257-3920 is the number. We will see you there. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous, you're a little bit upset, you're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457-238-56-27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on,
on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Rand Paul.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're not paying.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook.
Throw our hands up.
Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey, shut up.
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
we are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much for joining us. So we're just looking up that Emma put Tim Pool into the hospital or something like that.
I'm hearing this. I hope he's okay. But it is a little interesting. I mean, perhaps coincidental, because didn't Crowder go into the hospital after your...
Well, he did. As we now know, that was for elective gender affirming surgery.
Well, yes. I had to. I mean, I think after our exchange, he had to. The only way he could build his self-esteem was to add pecs.
All of a sudden, you look in the mirror, and the things you were kind of comfortable with, all of a sudden you're insecure about, and you need to get taken care of.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if it was actually cosmetic surgery, but it's funny. I just looked up Tim Pool in the hospital, and Tim Pool got apparently really bad COVID a year after our exchange, where he's like, "Why won't you come to my studio? COVID's over."
Wait, does he have long COVID?
I mean, I remember that, right? It was just weeks afterwards.
No, I think it was a year after.
When he got COVID?
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, maybe.
I don't know.
Who knows?
It doesn't really matter.
Get well soon, buddy.
Sam's only fan. Please forgive my ignorance, Sam, but was the hat you wore yesterday similar to the ones usually worn by Hasidic Orthodox Jews, right? When I first saw it, I thought you just became a rabbi to dunk on the Pope of the Jews, Ben Shapiro. No, folks, it was that hat was actually used by Michael in his April Fool's portrayal.
In the Rage Against the Corporate Sellout show.
Yes, exactly.
When you were what? That guy, H.A. Goodman?
Well, I wasn't. I was just playing a character.
Oh.
That has no relation to anybody else.
There was no relation to anybody's name, real or others.
Notarized.
Yeah, that was yes. All the names have been changed. Majority Report wardrobe coordinator. Maybe Tim Pool had some bad sushi.
I mean, it's this West. Like again, I shouldn't say that. Sushi and fish can travel, and I have like a mental block where I prefer it.
It's an East Coast elitism. Let's call it
is East Coast elitism. Yes, I prefer it on the coast or West Coast.
Exactly.
I mean, you're gonna get better sushi in the Pacific.
Honestly, yes.
I am turning off the voicemail now. The number is 646-257-3920. 646-257-3920 is the number if you want to be a part of this program. And meanwhile, let's go to, I wanted to play this clip from the other day because I think that it's people ask me who I think is going to win the presidency, and the first thing I say, you tell me first who's alive. The first week in November, and then I'll even fancy a guess. I think it's I think Donald Trump is going to be the Republican nominee. However, it is important to note that, and I think Donald Trump knows better than to go after Social Security and Medicare, but the rest of the Republican Party is certainly interested in that, despite the fact that that has been Trump's campaign promises. Here is Ron DeSantis flailing around on Social Security this weekend with Fox's Howard Kurtz. But the interesting thing here is understand, like, they try and do this desperate. Even when you're talking, I'm not going to cut Social Security, they say seconds later, but I am going to cut Social Security.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Christie said that he's going to cut Social Security. I almost appreciate it if he were to be president. I almost appreciate that honesty more than whatever the hell this is.
Chris Christie's been on that for a long time. Shared sacrifice means that people who rely on Social Security won't need it. But listen to the incoherence of this response by Ron DeSantis. I mean, all the words sound glib. He's able to get his talking points out. But if you actually examine what he's saying, it is completely self-disproving. Listen.
Let me get to a couple of issues. You've said that Republicans are not going to mess with Social Security, but as a congressman, you voiced support for privatizing Social Security and raising the retirement age to 70 for future seniors down the road. What made you change your mind?
Well, I've always said, promise made, promise kept. I'm a governor of Florida. Of course we're going to protect people's Social Security. My grandmother passed away when she was 91. That was her sole source of income. And that's true for millions of seniors. And so that goes without saying. So when people say that we're going to somehow cut seniors, so that is totally not true. Talking about making changes for people in their 30s or 40s so that the program's viable, that's a much different thing. And that's something that I think that there's going to need to be discussions on. But that's just the reality in terms of where I've been. So I don't think it's necessarily a change. And in terms of privatization, what I always said was you aren't going to be able to offer individual accounts because there's no Social Security surplus. There used to be massive surpluses.
Yeah. Okay, this is him saying that, yes, I was for privatization, but now I'm not, because it's not the flavor du jour. But let's listen to what he says here. We're not going to cut Social Security for people who are getting it now. We're going to cut it for people who are 30 and 40.
Right.
Seconds
when they
after he says.
Yeah.
When seconds after he says that his grandmother relied on Social Security as her sole source of income.
Yes.
Why? Are we to believe that these people who are 30 and 40 today will not age and become grandmothers? Will somehow all of these people disappear? Why would he deny Social Security to some of those 30 and 40-year-olds who will, like his grandmother, rely on Social Security, unfortunately, as their sole source of income in retirement? In fact, it keeps 2/3 of our elderly out of poverty. There is no reason to think that it's going to keep any less out of, or need to keep less out of poverty for 30 and 40-year-olds in 30 and 25 years down the road. It's just.
But they won't be voting for him for president then. Don't you understand? They won't have the effects of Social Security cuts felt until they're at retirement age. And by then it'll be too late for anyone to do anything about it. And Ron DeSantis, in his mind, will have been a 2-term president. That's genuinely the cynicism of this kind of thing. It's the same reason that they don't push for Social Security and Medicare cuts when they have a Republican in the executive branch in the White House, because they just want the Democrat to own it as a part of, what they tried to do multiple times with Obama.
I mean, to be fair, certainly George Bush wanted to privatize it, and Obama wanted to cut the cost of living increases for seniors, and so and to I guess presumably blame it on the Republicans. Fortunately, which I do think is a sign of movement on behalf of Democrats is that there is absolutely no push amongst the Democratic Party to cut Social Security. Even Joe Biden, who was bragging about it 30 years ago, that he wants to cut Social Security, in no way whatsoever in a position he knows to push cuts for Social Security. I mean, this is the way the politics work, folks, is that it's not just a matter of one guy. The question is, who are the people that bring this person into office? And, one of the most disturbing things about the RFK clip, again, the anti-Semitism aside for a moment, because I don't know that he's anti-Semitic as much as what he was saying was anti-Semitic, because it is a clear indication between the anti-Semitism, the idea that we definitely have bioweapons, and the idea that COVID was manufactured and targeted towards certain people, because it couldn't be targeted towards certain people if it wasn't manufactured. Let's be clear. Gives you an indication of who he's talking to and where he's getting his information. Not to mention, we should say the claim about the bioweapons lab in that exists in Ukraine, which was debunked and was at one point like a mid 6 or 7 months in, Putin was claiming that's why we're there, to stop weapons of mass destruction. But it is about the people that you're surrounded by.
Yeah.
And where whose ideas you're listening to. Let's go to the phones. Speaking of listening to, calling from a 308 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, it is Kowalski reporting from a bean field.
Kowalski from a bean field. What's on your mind?
Well, first, some quick agricultural news. The grain deal being rejected by the Russians has gotten a lot of market spooked. We saw the prices of a lot of commodities fall over the last month, but they're starting to tick up pretty aggressively right now. So that'll be something to keep an eye on. It would be catastrophic if the Russians do anything to a grain shipment, but up in the air. We'll just have to wait and see. Other than that, things seem to be going pretty good in the U.S., except the Southwest has got, a lot of heat problems. But one of the reasons I wanted to call in was yesterday, your guys' interview on NATO expansion kind of rubbed me the wrong way. Basically, I think a lot of people don't view Eastern Europe and Russia as having their own agency, and typically like to ignore all of the imperialism Russia engaged in almost immediately after it reconstituted itself after the fall of the Soviet Union. Because a lot of people forget this. The Russians invaded Moldova and caused the breakaway region of Transnistria. They put Central Asia under their thumb way worse than the U.S. has done in Latin America in the last 30 years. All of the stuff they did scared the hell out of the former Warsaw Pact, and they all went running to NATO for protection. And then people say that this doesn't provide NATO with any benefit, but to that I would say the front line just got moved 500 miles away from their countries. And it makes the prospect of war go down, because instead of dealing with an alliance of 600 million, now you're dealing with an alliance of 900 million, making the prospect of a conventional conflict with the Russians next to suicidal for the Russians to engage in. So, as far as a benefit goes, everyone in the alliance, especially the Eastern flank, benefits. And as Russia has expressed, from the presidency to the Duma to the MOD, Poland is on the chopping block, Hungary is on the chopping block, and so is Romania. So, I mean, I don't really understand how people can say that those aren't legitimate concerns.
Yeah, I mean, I had some differences with Bessner on this, and I think your argument. I mean, I think like the argument that had Ukraine, let's say, become a member of NATO prior, a year or two ago, let's say, just hypothetically, would that have made a Russian invasion, i.e., a war, more or less likely? I don't know if we can really answer that question because it's quite clear that Putin's estimation of the Russian army's capacity was wrong. You know what I mean? I mean, dramatically wrong. And had Ukraine been a member of NATO, then the war would have been a massive war. He might have been stupid to, attack a NATO country at that time, but there's no reason to believe that his intelligence about his own army's capacity was accurate to begin with. And so I don't know, but I mean, I think the point you're making is, a legit one. I think that the perspective, I think without speaking for Bessner, I think his perspective is that, stopping the imperial designs of the United States, Trump inhibiting the imperial designs of Russia. I mean, I think that's, how that...
I would disagree greatly with that on its face. Now, don't get me wrong, the American empire is terrible and needs to be stopped, but if the retreat of a distant democratic, although authoritarian when it comes to like corporate interest empire, leaves a power vacuum for a militaristic expansionist state that invades Ukraine with the express intent of genocide, I would say that that is a bad shakeout, no matter how you look at it. They marched into Ukraine with the express intent to exterminate the Ukrainian identity. That's a different level of conflict than I think most people alive today are willing to like really look at. I mean, the only parallel we have are a lot of the brush wars in Africa in the 90s, and most people aren't even aware that nearly 5 million people died in those.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm characterizing, I think, Bessner's argument. I think, I don't know, and I want to speak for him, but I think, there may be an argument that the rest of Europe would have, in the absence of a NATO alliance, I guess, built up their militaries in a way in which maybe they could carry this fight. There's not been a great history of European nations becoming military juggernauts. That hasn't worked out so well, at least in recent history. So I'm not sure that you necessarily want that. I feel like Derek was a little bit more, circumspect about those things. That was my sense. But I mean, look, I think there is value in examining these questions. I mean, I think it's important to sort of like hear that perspective, which I think, to the extent that we hear these perspectives, I think that, Bessner's perspective on it, I think is sincere and, laid out in good faith. I mean, I tend to, I don't see how we could have not responded. And I do think that there is value in us, sort of like trying to steer the conflict. I've said this in the past, to have an end game, to have a line drawn as to like how, what kind of aid, military aid we give and for what ends. I think that's
I actually would like to disagree with you a little bit on that one, if you'll let me explain.
sure.
So, from how I understand geopolitics to work in a in the context of a war like this, by basically giving the Ukrainians a blank check, we are signaling to the Russians, politically speaking, Ukraine will not run out of money. They will not run out of ammo. They will not run out of fuel. You cannot win a war of attrition against them. It is fruitless for you to keep up this fight. They can outlast you in terms of resources. You should sue for peace immediately because you're just going to be throwing people into a wall of steel. That is the point of it, because that actually creates the conditions for peace. You cannot have peace with an invading genocidal army. If they were to just like do a white peace right now, people go back to their borders, the Russians will simply reconstitute themselves in 4 years and try again.
I mean, and I think there'll be less
operandi since the 90s.
They'll be less likely to have peace. I mean, that's one of the other points I made is that like there's no way that end game can be articulated publicly, because otherwise you lose the ability to bring Russia to the table. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be going on. I think that you have to project we're in this for the long haul to the Russians for, if you're actually suing for peace. But I think there has to be on some level, and like I say, it very well already could be. There could be an end game articulated, within the Biden administration. There could be an understanding of like, we as an administration are willing to, we have basically hinted to Zelensky, you're going to regain this territory and not that territory, or that's as far as we go on this trip. That I would imagine, I would hope that there's something like that, but obviously you can't articulate it, because if you articulate it, then you're basically telling Putin just how, when you will quit. And so, yeah, I mean, I agree in terms of what needs to be argued,
But that's just one theory about how Putin could react to that. Because I talked to Yasha Levine, and he was a little bit more depressed about how Putin's settling in, and actually like the Manichaean rhetoric is backing up both sides. Now I buy that. I don't believe that we should be like saying peace because of what it's going to be Putin do. I think we need to be open to diplomacy, which is like all I've said, and gets people called tankies. But I think we need to be open to that, not because of like the message it sends Putin, but because we actually do need more than just us. Like the world, if the world lines up behind Russia, which I think everyone thinks is stupid to do, but like that's just the way politics is played out. Like historically, we need to be sensitive to more than just like sending a message that we think Putin's going to psychologically respond in the right way to. We need to build a world coalition. And that's why I think like there's a certain type of faction that I do have a real problem with, and I'm curious what you think about this, Kowalski, but whenever like there's something that like, Blinken or whoever's going to meet with China and they might discuss this stuff, people get really sensitive about that stuff. And I think that is a big problem.
Well, like, I think us keeping up a dialogue with everyone is good. From what I understand, we still even have dialogue between like our higher military ups and the Russians to make sure there's no miscommunication on nukes. Like that kind of conversation with China would be reached. That, and I do think that like no matter how this war shakes out, like obviously we all hope for Ukrainian victory, but when it's done, I do think that like Russia needs to have its sanctions lifted and the country needs to be rebuilt and reincorporated immediately, because we kind of have to work together as a planet to address the climate crisis. And for that, we need pretty much everyone on board with that. And I do also think that that is another big issue of letting a war like this flare up to where Russia is a regional power and to where countries tolerate this kind of military action. Because when you look at countries in Europe right now, Poland is going to be spending over 6% of its GDP on military spending for the next 10 years. That's what they've already allotted to do. They're not going to be working on seawalls, which they need. They're not going to be working on any climate mitigation projects, which they need. Instead, they're worried about national sovereignty from the real threat on their border. So, like, I don't really see how allowing any state to go rogue at this point and cause such mass disruption to be a good thing.
Yep. And
it's complicated. I know I don't have all the answers.
But I guess
here,
like I guess here's the one question, Kowalski. Like, what if like the disruption, quote unquote, becomes adjusted to and becomes actually a stable environment for both Russia and like Western like war powers?
I just don't think it would. There's too much history in Eastern Europe from the oppression that Russia has inflicted upon them for centuries. They will always just be paranoid. Like, legitimately, when like my grandfather got to Europe during World War II, he was the only member of our family left on the continent, and he had to come from the States. And it wasn't the Nazis that took them out; it was the Soviets, prior to them being betrayed by the Germans. Like, the Russians have proven themselves to be a very bad actor from a military power standpoint, and nobody wants that to happen. Economically speaking, I think they could end up just like Germany, as long as they stop being a military aggressor and just like basically submit to the European order of things. Like, I really think if Russia just acted like a normal country, no one would be upset about that. But they're acting like they're an imperial power that can express itself without consequence on an area that they view as their backyard. I don't believe that, like, no one here believes the U.S. has some sort of special domination of the Caribbean or Latin America. That's ridiculous. But yet we're supposed to be like, well, Russia doesn't feel comfortable when Ukraine is under NATO protection. Like, that doesn't make sense. And their national security is not in danger because they have nuclear weapons. Any invading army would not only get glassed, but so would their capital. So there isn't even a threat to Russia from a security standpoint.
I mean, I think I've always had a problem with, like, the U.S. wouldn't tolerate, a Russian client state in Mexico, let's say.
I mean, Cuba.
But I would.
Right.
I would like us to, but we wouldn't.
Well, we
right.
didn't.
No, I don't think we would.
Yeah.
I don't think we would.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
but again,
Castro
we almost
hundreds
destroyed the
of
world
times.
over it.
Yeah.
right.
I'm not saying that isn't how the U.S. reacted. I'm saying that is what our principles are. We would not care if Cuba was in a military alliance defensive pact with the Chinese. I wouldn't care. It's not a threat. Any war between us ends in nuclear hellfire, so no one would do it.
Right. That's the same. I wouldn't care. I think U.S. policy would. But I appreciate the call, Kowalski.
Yeah, and Kowalski, just to bolster your point about denuclearization, that was also the point I tried to make a little bit to Bessner yesterday, just because I'm very much in favor of maintaining a soft power in the sense of incentivizing countries to do the right thing in terms of disarmaments. When the United States says we'll have your back in that way. I think that's an extra wrinkle as well, from the domestic perspective for the United States to hold on to the treaties that it's abided to as well. So that was another wrinkle, but we'll let you go.
Appreciate the call.
All righty. Wait, can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
I think we all know why Tim Pool is in the hospital, and it's because of what Emma did on air to him.
Yeah.
If you remember the IMs I've been sending, you know what that means. Goodbye.
Appreciate the call.
Many people are saying.
MIDI doctors in number 13 basically say there will be no peace talks over Ukraine until after the next presidential election cycle at the earliest. Russia's waiting for those results. And Fart Wayne says, if Matt loves Russia so much, why doesn't he just marry it? Calling from a 330 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Yes, hello. Is this me?
Yes.
Hi, this is Shane Foster. I'm calling from Ohio.
Shane from Ohio. What's on your mind?
I don't know if you guys covered it or not, but I was just calling to remind people of the upcoming special election on August 8th and how they should be voting no because it's trying to make ballot measures more difficult for people to get for like constitutional amendments and such.
I think we're going
they
to have
want to change it.
I think we're going to have Daniel Nikanian on, right? Is that right?
Yeah,
Bradley?
that's the plan. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we're going to be talking about that. In fact, I had meant to tell people that the last day to register was a couple of weeks ago, and I had forgotten in Ohio. But yes, this is something that everybody should be prepared to vote for in Ohio. I'm not sure what the absentee ballot situation is. Do you have any idea, Shane?
No, I can't remember. I think this already started like a while ago, and there's also in-person early voting currently on, I forget what the specific times are currently.
All right. Well, people should check that out. August 8th. Appreciate the call. We will talk about that topic in the coming weeks. Thanks for the call.
All right. Thanks.
Let's get to a clip here. Let's play this the SAG strike now in what, day 5? I've lost
Started
count.
Friday, so 4, 5, yeah.
This is great. This is who put this video out?
This is the AP Entertainment account on Twitter, the Associated Press. Yeah.
So it turns out that I babysat for this person.
No.
30 years ago.
Wow.
I worked with her father in cross comedy in Boston back in the day. And when she was literally a baby, I think her father was irresponsible enough to leave her in my care with John Benjamin. I think that we watched her for a brief period of time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And but here she is.
It's amazing she turned out so well, you know?
Yes, this is Jessie Ennis. And it's really fascinating because she is a second generation actor and has seen the implications of the change in the industry and how, you know, her father made his living from residuals. And she is having as much, if not more success than him, but not getting that kind of pay. Here's a clip from the AP Entertainment.
Well, first of all, I'm a second generation actor, so I grew up with a struggling actor for a dad, and we would live off of residuals. Like, he did bit parts in sitcoms in the 90s, and he'd put a cop on, you know, he'd play cop number 1 on something, or a logger on Malcolm in the Middle, and we would get residuals from those shows that would pay our rent, pay for our food for the month. We relied on residuals. Now, as an actor who is a series regular on multiple shows on streaming series, I don't see a penny of residuals. It's built into my contract. It's in a part of how I'm getting paid. And so I checked last night just to like cross-reference my residuals for the heck of it. And it's pretty funny. I mean, I've made like $700 in residuals for a show that I'm sure I could have made thousands for. I mean, we're talking like 30 episodes of TV on a show that I know people are watching. So it's definitely confusing. Like, I definitely feel like I'm being robbed.
Wow.
Yep. I mean, that is a big part of this dynamic. The industry has changed, and a lot of it is influenced by sort of a tech mentality now. And that tech mentality is, you know, we can basically gigify our workers here and not have to pay them a living.
$700 in residuals for a streaming show of 30 episodes.
It's nuts.
It's absolutely nuts.
If you can pull this, Zach Bornstein, he's a writer and a comedian, has this tweet up, a good one of the contrast two headlines, or a couple things. Annual cost of SAG-AFTRA DGA WGA contracts may be $450 to $600 million a year, Moody's estimates. And if you go to the next one, highest paid Hollywood execs in the past 5 years: David Zaslav, $498 million; Ari Emanuel, $346 million; Reed Hastings, $209; Bob Iger, $195; Ted Sarandos, $192. Yeah, you guys start doing some acting. Yeah, you guys write some movies.
Oh yeah, right.
And so screenwriter pay dropped 14% in those 5 years.
And these are just people not on the creative side. They're money men. They're
Empires.
They're empires, and the thing that gets the eyeballs are the human beings whose blood, there's not sweat, tears, not really blood, hopefully, but their like creative work is what drives all of this, and they're just being leached off of.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you that the residuals from Bob's Burgers for many years paid for my health insurance. And by making the SAG minimum, it's an important component. I made far more from residuals than I did from the session fee. People would be, I think, a little surprised. I mean, I was not a regular. There's, you can get contracts as a regular, which was all the staff. I mean, with all the cast that you would imagine. You can get a reoccurring contract, but I was just a day player contract. I mean, at one point, I think maybe in year 8 or 9, my session fee went up. But that is I think people would be surprised that sort of like that session fee was so low, but then I think they'd be surprised that the residuals were high, and it made a big difference. And the residuals, to be clear, is like an if-come situation. I got residuals because it told me where they sold the show again.
Right.
And so this is not like you're just paying this out. It is a function of the success of the show. You get paid for your part in the success of the show.
Yeah.
Every time you see somebody come up and accept an award, they talk about how this is such a collaborative endeavor. And it's true. It is a collaborative endeavor. But you should participate in the success.
Yeah, my understanding, Sam, is like maybe in Canada you get more up front but don't get residuals, whereas America it's a residual thing. And I guess like it makes sense, like, because otherwise who's going to get the residual like down, like when you sell it to TBS 20 years later, it's going to would all go to the executives. Well,
I mean, this is the thing. I mean, Canada may work in a very different way because in the television business before there was streaming, the way that shows were made is that a studio would, and then it changed a little bit in the mid 90s, but a studio would front the money to make a show. Maybe they would bring in, and then they would sell it to a network, and it was a break-even proposition at first, but then the whole thing was to get the show in syndication, shoot 100 episodes was usually the minimum that you needed for syndication, and then they sell it again, and then they sell it again, and then they sell it again, and then they sell it again. That whole model has changed, but the actors' pay was still based on that model. The model changes to a network produces the show. They don't sell it again. They just keep playing it and playing it and playing it. Or they make a strictly sort of like a decision not based on the success or the quality of the show, but rather on like, almost like a calculation that they have to pay out too many residuals on these streaming things. So they'll just pull it down. The problem is they don't want to reveal how many people watch these shows. And it's not necessarily, in my opinion, I may be wrong, because they want to deny actors their residuals. It is they don't want shareholders to realize what their business model is.
Right.
And their business model is, we have a show that gets us in the news. We have a show that gets well reviewed, but not many people watch it. Yeah. And people are lazy. And once they have a subscription to a streaming service, they tend not to cancel it. And I think the people who run these subscription services are afraid that their shareholders are going to go, wait a second, is this a business model I want to invest in? Probably not.
Yeah, as Netflix in particular is notorious for scrapping television shows, going season to season very quickly, without any plan for the future to wrap up the series, essentially, because they just make these algorithmic decisions to cut costs, and then they try to churn out whatever is new and most likely to bring in eyeballs.
Isn't it cool how much of society is geared toward dazzling investors?
Totally. I mean, that's what it is,
Exactly.
though. It's like
Totally.
a new worm on the end of a hook, and then once you catch the fish, the subscribers will yank this. I mean, whatever. All those buzzy shows on Netflix that just went into like the ether. I mean, the
TV sucks
the one
now.
about chess, the queen. Yeah, right.
I'm so like, it's funny, like the guidance from the unions on like, wait, so we can all, like, I'm ready to cut stuff. Like, just tell me when.
I know.
Like, I'll just like, I don't know. I'll find
I cut
stuff.
Disney Plus a few months ago before this, just because I was like, this is garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all, and like HBO going to Max, and all of a sudden it's being trash. Like, everything's
Yep.
so diluted. It's horrible.
Well, I can tell you one of the reasons why. The reason why, in addition to it being a lot of work, the reason why we ended the Peacock, the second Peacock show, was because I didn't feel like anybody was watching.
I'll say
I didn't
that
feel like there was an audience.
Peacock might be my favorite streaming app right now because it has all the Real Housewives on it. And
my
you know
God.
what they do?
Oh my
What they
God.
do for the reality shows is like they take out the bleeps.
Cut her mic.
They take out the bleeps.
Wow,
so
you
you
get
can
to hear
hear
him say the F word?
The F words and stuff.
That's
Because
pretty awesome.
it's a more enjoyable viewing experience, especially for the reunions. I'm just saying.
Hey, there's a growth opportunity for
Yeah,
media.
yeah.
Take out the swear. You can
Yeah.
hear the swears. I want an NBA game like that actually too.
Right.
Don't fade that. I want to hear
See?
them swear.
Yeah, that streaming, that's your next frontier.
Calling from a 518 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Jesse from Oregon.
Jesse from Oregon. What's on your mind?
So I just wanted to address. I consider myself a social libertarian, and no, I'm just kidding. So I was just calling. So I went to Neil Young concert last night.
Yep.
Which was phenomenal, and there was this guy that opened for him. His name is Chris Pierce. And he sang this song. Let me just check what the name is. It's called Chain Gang 4th of July, and it's just addressing like wage theft. And the guy's voice is phenomenal. The guy was like a phenomenal performer. But of course, in Oregon, the population is largely white, and I heard people behind me, just kind of muttering to themselves about like, oh, I don't know if I agree with this. And it's like such an insane kind of thing to me that people who listen to Neil Young, or you would think that they listen to Neil Young going to his concert, they're bitching and complaining about like, they didn't say anything about woke specifically, but it's like, you have people complaining about, essentially the quote unquote woke ideology. And I just thought that was completely baffling. And so I just wanted to make a comment just from a progressive mindset. I certainly consider myself a progressive, and I think it's important for progressives, especially progressive channels, to continue just kind of challenging the status quo like you folks do, and kind of being open to criticism and challenging your blind spots, and opposite of conservatives, and like basically what the people in attendance seemed to be were basically like Bill Maher's, like in the 90s, maybe they were, into some of the progressive views, but then they just stopped and they're like, oh no, we won. And, so I just think, what you guys do is important, and I really appreciate it, just kind of keeping the conversation moving forward. And, So I really appreciate you guys and what you do, and yeah, just keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank God you weren't a libertarian socialist.
I felt,
I know.
You should have saw how far back I leaned in my chair.
You saw me
I disassociated.
Dr. Douglas, while I normally enjoy your show, I do believe you all dropped the ball yesterday in your coverage of RFK. You all focused on the vax conspiracy, treated the racism with short thrift. It's important because that racism is the basis of the conspiracy theory. Designer viruses that target racial groups, that's 19th century racial pseudoscience. There are no biological races. Racial categories like black, white, Chinese are socially determined and don't map onto a genetic variability in a meaningful way. In fact, there's often more genetic variability within racially defined groups than there is between them. Focusing on RFK's extreme racism is important for dismantling his insane conspiracy theories. I
mentioned the Jewish Bolshevism element, but I think you're right that there was like this tacit, specifically when he said black people, that
That's a genetically diverse grouping of people. And you see this a lot with this discussion of, like, I think Sam Harris will have it where they talk about, actually, if we look at very specific groups of people, like, I mean, maybe Ashkenazi, I don't even know if that's specific enough or if there's too much genetic, like, but like between black people, which is like in America, black Americans is an insanely diverse genetically.
100%. Yeah, and it's constructed, race is a social construct, but blackness in that way, in terms of like the biology, certainly artificially constructed.
Josh Marshall had I thought a pretty good piece on it, and he said that the important thing is, in his opinion, and I tend to agree with this, is not whether RFK is anti-Semitic or racist in that way, but rather like it gives an indication of where he is hanging out. That the racism and the it doesn't make the argument that you do that the COVID conspiracies emanate from sort of like racialized eugenic or some old-timey racism conspiracy theories. But he makes the argument that you hear these theories run sort of like with other conspiracy theories because it becomes, we're going to say hidden truth. And these are things, anything that we're not supposed to say is the truth by definition. That's why they're telling us not to say it. It's because it's the truth. And he's clearly like hanging out in those quarters intellectually. And it's really disturbing.
Yeah.
Really disturbing. We're not going to do this very often. That is to play a clip from Meet the Press and praise it. I don't know that I've ever done this.
Let's Chuck Todd's best moment.
Well, he's out now, right?
Yeah, he's gone.
Yeah.
Right. No, this is Vaughn Hilliard. And I don't know. To be honest with you, I have no idea that I didn't even realize this was Meet the Press. I don't know if they're doing like a series of interviews or this was like thrown to a package. I don't know. But this clip is really impressive.
They can do journalism now that Chuck Todd is gone.
I guess so. It's No Labels co-founder Nancy Jacobson. I don't know really much about her. Despite the fact that it's a very transparent organization. One of the big No Labels people is Joe Lieberman, and they have raised $70 million. And this is amazing to me. Let me put it this way. If their candidate is, a fraction of as incompetent as their co-founder is, it's a laugh riot. But here's Vaughn Hilliard questioning Jacobson about the transparency, the funding, and the rationale for the no labels presidential campaign?
How much money has no labels raised?
We are close to our goal. We are looking in the next several months, I'd say.
$70 million?
Yes, that's been the goal that's been out there, and we expect to meet that goal.
This is a presidential
We should just
ticket.
say this is not a Saturday Night Live sketch from the 80s. You know, like she, you imagine being asked, how much money did you raise? And you're like, we made our goal.
Yeah, right.
And that's the number that's been in the press.
If that's the number you say, the number is that is close to is what we do is.
Sam, do you know who she's married to?
Oh God,
Mark Penn.
There you go. that explains everything. All right, start from the beginning.
How much money has no labels raised?
We are close to our goal. We are looking in the next several months, I'd say.
$70 million?
Yes, that's been the goal that's been out there, and we expect to meet that goal.
This is a presidential ticket, high stakes that we're talking about. Why not reveal your donors?
Because the truth is about the time in which we live in. You reveal, first of all, we're not a party. And second of all, we're not.
You guys are registering as a party in states around the country.
That's just the requirements of the state.
The Democratic Party, the Republican Party, they have to go and submit their donors. So if you guys are registering,
let's talk about what we're doing. We are building a movement of the common sense majority, and we're getting ballot access in the 50 states, and we will never run a campaign. This organization, at the moment,
but you're registering as a political party.
But that's just language. That's not, we are not functioning. We are one ticket, one time. A party, definition of a party is running candidates up and down the ballot. That is not what we're doing.
Your organization, though, in a video posted just 2 weeks ago, stated, quote, "We believe in transparency, not backroom deals. You have no primaries or caucuses. There are rich people that are funneling millions of dollars to your effort. Why should the public trust
rich people
that this is nothing short of a backroom deal?"
Because we've been around for 13 years. They can see the leaders around us. They can see Senator Joe Lieberman. They can see Governor Larry Hogan. They can see a civil rights leader, Ben Chavis. They can see all the leaders. They can see our work for the last 13 years. I mean, it's all, that work is all light. They can see our ideas, the common sense ideas. I mean, put our ideas out on the table and see the people that are around us. But we know how the game works in politics these days. It's not that people really want to see the donors, because there's nothing nefarious going on here. It's because
why should they trust that, though?
You know what? They're going to have to see us through our work.
We're not a political party. We're not trying to run any candidates, but we're applying for ballot access in multiple states. Like, I appreciate.
It's literally all backroom deals.
I know, and I appreciate that he tried to really get her on the dark money and the funding and stuff like that. But I also would have wanted to ask a bit more about what their ideology is, because No Labels wants to talk about, like, we're not left wing, we're not right wing, we're right in the middle, which means you're right on the right.
She answered.
Well,
she answered. She said common sense.
I'm sorry.
Movement of common sense.
I forgot about that. But like,
it's a movement of common sense.
I think that the thrust of the questioning is about, like, if No Labels runs a presidential candidate, it's going to be a spoiler and Donald Trump could get elected, right? But it's like, well, what is the purpose of No Labels in general then, outside of that practical outcome?
They've been promoting common sense for 13 years. Where have you been?
I guess I don't place the value on common sense in terms of, like, a value proposition for what I want in my politics. That's just not really what I lead with.
I would like to meet the single human being who lives on the planet who is not working for or receiving funds or having given funds to No Labels, who can state one thing they have done in terms of their work over the past 13 years. I have spent those past 13 years covering politics. I cannot tell you one thing they have done other than come out and pretend that they are some type of no partisan or bipartisan organization. I mean, outside of their branding, I can't even tell you what they have done and who their constituency is. We can't possibly know, because their only constituents are the big money donors who gave them money.
It's very funny to go on their Twitter page and just find any tweet by them and try to look through their replies for a single fan of theirs, and it's all people from the left to the right saying you're frauds.
Yeah,
Like,
right.
Like there's literally nobody who's like, oh, thank you for the sensible policies statement.
Well, okay, but to be fair, that's because the common sense people are completely censored on Twitter. They get common censors get shadow banned.
Makes sense. Makes common sense.
Calling from a 315 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. Hey, Emma. My name's Lydia. I'm calling from Nazareth, Pennsylvania. I wanted to say something real quick. I know you guys are probably as sick to death as I am about this, or about hearing about this, but I wanted to thank you all for standing up for the trans community. I am, by the way, trans. So thank you for that. And Emma, thank you for being logically and ideologically consistent, unlike, some people on the left in the media.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. But anyway, I wanted to talk about something. I was watching the other day when you had another trans girl call in, and it got me thinking about something that I don't see talked about a lot. So I'm also a veteran. I receive all my care, my primary care and my gender affirming care at the VA. Yes. So, last week when we had this whole thing about the National Defense Spending Bill and, all that they were trying to do with that, it raised a lot of fears. If such a ban goes through, I'm concerned that myself and people like me, would not only lose our gender affirming care, which is, that in and of itself is a major blow to our health, but there's also the concern of losing primary care there, as has happened in states where similar bans have passed. I know lots of people in Florida have lost a lot of their primary care physicians. That's just really concerning. Yeah.
Well, and the loss of the primary care physician becomes because it becomes unclear where the supposed trans care begins and ends. Is that it?
That seems to be the case. Yeah. I've read a couple of, take this with however big of a grain of salt you want. I've heard of a lot of people getting dropped from their primary care providers because their primary care providers didn't want to have the appearance of offering gender affirming care.
Right. I mean, it
that's the chilling
functions in
effect.
yeah, it functions in the same way that the speech bans in Florida function. The don't say gay. You create enough sort of like uncertainty that everybody's going to err on the side of the most sort of like draconian censoring stuff. The same way that like abortion care. People are going to err on the side that's going to keep them out of jail, essentially. Exactly. And it's the same dynamic.
Yeah. And a further point. So I came out as trans in 2020. Right when I came out and started, actually doing my medical transition, everybody at the VA was like, oh, they're going to start paying. So, okay. Backing up a little bit. Right now, they only pay for like any therapy or hormone therapy. They don't pay for any surgeries or anything like that currently. They said back in 2020 that within 2 years that they would start doing that again. It's, this whole big process, blah, 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 and it's going to take some time. Be patient. Here we are 3 years later. It's still not the case.
And arguably going the other direction.
Correct. And that's exactly where I'm going. We have, a little over a year before, who knows what the hell's going to happen, it could be.
Right.
I personally am not optimistic. And I know that if Trump or DeSantis were to get into office, it would be an immediate ban. And that's concerning, and that's, I depend on the VA for my healthcare in both ways. And I would certainly lose that with either of them. Possibly even with a Biden win too. Who knows?
Right. Well, I'm sorry. Hopefully, another round of failure on this issue. I mean, like we can see with DeSantis that it's not even resonating with Republican voters in the way that they hope it. I mean, a lot, the
leopards are starting to eat some faces, and people are, getting a little scared.
Exactly. And that is, I mean, ultimately, it's one thing for, a couple of congressmen or, and obviously we can see this in the context of Republican state legislatures passing these bans. But, if it stops broadly on a federal level, resonating with people, it at least in terms of like the VA may be protected. But I mean, hang in there, and I really appreciate the call.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye. That caller still there? I can't even see the caller. Didn't show up online.
Not seeing it.
Okay. Which clip should we do here?
Ooh, I guess maybe the Jesse Waters debut thing. We should probably touch on that. Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. So Jesse Waters' first show in Tucker's slot.
Hey, incidentally, I think I predicted this on day one when they put in a co-host who was a black woman. They put in a host, I think, as a black woman.
Harris Faulkner was one of the
Harris Faulkner for a week, and I think I said they're doing this because they want to put in Jesse Waters, and they need to basically like cleanse the palate so that Waters is not compared so directly. To Tucker. I mean,
we had an open audition process, totally right, and then that is not the case. They wanted Waters.
They really traversed far. They went from one bigot who went to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, to another bigot who went to Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut. The biggest difference, of course, is that Tucker Carlson, when he started out his career, he was critical of Bill O'Reilly, though he came to emulate him in some way. Whereas Jesse Waters worked for Bill O'Reilly and really basically is doing an impression of him.
Yeah.
Even down to the like, this like.
He was doing man on the street stuff.
What was that?
For O'Reilly.
Lieutenant Andrea Bocelli.
Lieutenant Andrea Bocelli. All right. Here is Jesse Waters and his new. Which one of these do we? I mean,
Well, let's start with the thing that's making the headlines is that he decided to have his mom on as a guest.
This is to humanize him in some way and make it seem like he's not, he's not, he's hearing the other side.
Total freak.
Yeah.
We have a very special guest on the line, a Democrat, my mom. Mom?
Hello there, Jesse.
Hello there, Mom. How have you enjoyed the show so far?
I have enjoyed the show. I want to say congratulations, Honey Bun. We are so proud of you and your accomplishments, and you've worked so hard. Now let's aim to have you keep your job. And to that end, I do have some suggestions.
Okay.
Do not tumble into any conspiracy rabbit holes. We do not want to lose you, and we want no lawsuits.
Okay.
Okay. In keeping, I have a list here. In keeping with the Hippocratic Oath, do no harm.
Too late.
We need you to be kind.
That's for doctors.
And respectful. You yourself mentioned that humble is a stretch, so I get that. Use your voice responsibly to promote conversation that maintains a narrative thread. There really has been enough Biden bashing, and the laptop is old. Perhaps you could suggest that your people take less interest, for example, in other people's bodies, and talk about that.
Hell yeah.
Well,
There's another part, but she keeps going. I thought that the fact that she brought up the lawsuits on his debut was pretty well done on her end.
I'm beginning to think if Merrick Garland is paying her off to tell people that people don't, the obvious lie that people don't care about the Hunter Biden laptop anymore.
Yeah. That's something that we should be looking into this. But like, this makes me a little scared that, if I have kids one day, that I'll be, too close to some sort of, radioactive material and just one is going to pop out and turn out horrible because she seems lovely and he's horrible.
She's like, I love you, but you're a moron. You're a dumbass.
I mean, he obviously is smart enough to, humanize himself in that way. So I have, I don't know. I'm a little skeptical about that whole thing, to be honest. I mean, her points are well taken, but I don't know if she's watched any of his shows over the past 10 years or however he's been on. Everything she asked him not to do, he's already done. In fact, that's why he's there.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
every single thing, going down conspiracy holes, not being nice, attacking individuals. This is the guy, incidentally, who would essentially jump complete civilians on behalf of Bill O'Reilly. Bill O'Reilly, remember, is the guy who labeled Tiller the killer, an abortion provider who was ultimately assassinated because he was providing abortions. And Jesse Waters was given the task of going to, some random member of a school board or some doctor who had, was providing abortions or, some, intern somewhere and essentially going and harassing them on camera as ostensible news. That's why Ryan Grimm, I think, decked him, literally. Decked him because he had done this with an intern at the time. I think she was an intern at the Center for American Progress, Amanda Turkle, but ultimately became a reporter at HuffPo, and now I think is I'm not sure where she's working, but she's now a fairly accomplished reporter. But Jesse Waters was sent out to harass and intimidate, and he is a loathsome person. So. While I appreciate his mom, calling in and providing a cute segment, the fact is every single thing she asked him not to do is exactly why he's there. Is because he's been doing that and more and worse.
And I will, every time Jesse Waters comes up, I remind people that he bragged about letting the airs out of the tires of one of the junior producers or interns, I forget, at Fox News so that she would be stranded in the parking garage and have to go home with him on a date, I guess, so he could give her a ride. That is the kind of guy that he is. So for all the women out there, that should probably set off some alarm bells for you.
Calling from let's see here. Got a lot of people who've been on the line for the exact same amount of time. Calling from a 334 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Oh, is this me?
Yeah, this is you.
Okay. I'm calling from Alabama, and my name is Mason.
Hi, Mason. What's on your mind?
I wanted to talk about...
Mason, can you back off your phone a little bit? It's really distorted.
Yeah, how's this?
Yeah, stay back there.
Okay. I wanted to talk about a bill that was introduced to the Alabama legislature. They define a fetus, human as like moment of conception.
Can you back off? I think what you're saying is that it's a personhood bill.
Yeah, but I think the implications are pretty concerning because, of course, Alabama has a death penalty as well, and this can be applied to anyone under the age of 14. So if this were to go through, they could persecute anyone who does an abortion, like under the capital punishment.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I guess I haven't. I'll look into the bill. I'm not fully aware of it, but I appreciate the call.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Phone's not good. Let's go back to the phones. Calling from a 570 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Tony from Scranton. Can you hear me okay?
Tony from Scranton. What's on your mind?
Hey, well, I was fortunate enough to come back from Italy earlier in the end of May, beginning of June. And it was before Berlusconi had died. And I was wondering if anybody has any idea or insight as to what exactly is going on with Meloni's pro-Ukrainian stance as the head of that coalition, with Berlusconi being like best friends, like literally best friends with Putin. And the other one, Salvini, who was part of her coalition, was basically run out of office the first time because of a huge scandal that he was involved with the Russian government as well, taking all kinds of bribes and all kinds of money. So with her two counterparts being so pro-Putin and pro-Russian government, I cannot figure out for the life of me why or how, or if it's genuine, her continued support of the Ukrainian war effort. And she is. They're sending all kinds of money and military weapons and everything. But it seems like, why would she risk her entire political career over it? Do you guys have any insight on into that, or?
I have no real insight into that. I mean, I would imagine that, like, from a governing position, there's a combination of carrots and sticks coming from NATO for some of the NATO stalwarts to hold the line. That's what I would
take
imagine.
on NATO or work on some of your domestic agenda and maybe leave the NATO fight for later. I think probably. I mean, again, that's just looking from the outside of it. Like, campaigns are very different than governing.
Yep.
Appreciate the call. All right. Calling from a 336 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Alan from North Carolina. Can you hear me?
Alan from North Carolina. Are you in your car?
Yes, I am in my car.
All right. Well, try and speak up, Alan.
Okay, so like I said, I live in North Carolina, and I don't know, it's just a really dire state right now because of, they're kind of like, now that they have a veto-proof majority, they're just passing all these laws that they weren't able to pass before because of our Democratic governor.
Yep.
So it's like we've kind of been fast-tracked into this the kind of red state hellscape that a lot of other states have been gradually working towards.
Yep.
And I think it's particularly egregious here because of the way that our collegiate system is so ingrained into the upper mobility in the state. So you guys are one of the schools that were in the Harvard decision was UNC.
Right.
So North Carolina has a very topsy-turvy history. North Carolina and Virginia in particular have a very topsy-turvy history when it comes to affirmative action. The school I went to high school in was I think it was in 2007 or something like that. They just got out of court because they failed to integrate their schools properly. Because it's a pretty common thing here in North Carolina where you'll have a side of town where there's a quote unquote black high school, and then there's more integrated high schools, and then there's less integrated high schools. So that's one of the reasons why my school system that I went to school in got in trouble originally. So,
well, I'll tell you, I think there was a good point that Ellie Mistel made in a piece in The Nation about that affirmative action ruling, and that was not too dissimilar from what we were just talking about in terms of providing trans care or the Don't Say Gay law in Florida, or the abortion bans, and how people react in a way to make sure that they, once the court has ruled on something like that, that they don't run afoul of these laws. And Ellie Mastel made the point that because it is so difficult to assess how an admissions, a college admissions office would look at an essay and see that I'm not doing this because the person says that they've dealt with being, the discrimination that comes from being black, let's say, but rather because of their personal sort of mettle or grit associated with that dynamic, because that's so hard to parse out. Ellie Mastel makes the point that, like, the only way to prove that you're not, engaging in some type of affirmative action to the outside world is to lower the number of black people that you admit into your school, and that this is going to, in some ways, incentivize universities to admit less black people in than they were, under a different sort of like a standard. And I think it's going to be an incredible problem. And we're going to see, look, for those people who say that, this is important ruling because, black people in colleges, are considered suspect because of affirmative action. It was outlawed in California, and we saw black enrollment drop, and those memes did not go away.
Yeah.
That narrative did not go away. And it's just
you still particularly see people tweet specifically about schools in California and say, they get, that thing that they do where they give basically they give the stats of a student. They're like, this student didn't get into a school. And then I think particularly for people who are far removed from either going to college or having a child who's been to college recently, they don't really get how the admissions process has really changed recently. And I thought that it would be more obvious after, that college admissions scandal that it's not really about grades anymore. A lot of these schools, they look for particular types of students to fill out their student body, whether it be it's particularly one of the biggest ways that students get into school with low test scores is through sports. So
True.
What happens is that schools will take, let's say for instance, I had a friend in high school, right, was one of the highest ranked kids in my school, and it was a pretty big high school in Raleigh, North Carolina. So it was a pretty big deal that he was ranked high, because now, particularly because GPAs are so common and scores are so common, what a lot of schools do is they base it off of your rank in your school more so than they do off of your individual merit.
Right, your grades.
If you have a lot of, with the prevalence of AP courses, a lot of some schools have less AP courses than other schools, and that puts the students with less AP courses at a disadvantage. So they tend to take your ranking in your school into account more than your actual GPA.
Yeah.
So, but my friend was one of the highest ranked kids in school. He applied to MIT. Another kid who was ranked a little lower than him and applied to MIT as well. And the guy that was ranked lower got into MIT and he didn't. The biggest reason why the guy that was ranked lower than him got in is because he was a really good swimmer. So he, as a unified student, when they looked at his basically everything he had to offer to their school, they saw him as a good swimmer, and that put him head and shoulders above someone like my other friend who was ranked higher than him in school. And that's something that a lot of these admissions
it's always been. I appreciate the call.
Sort of
I think it's always been, and thanks for the call. I think it's always been a combination of factors. There different factors are weighted in different ways. And the affirmative action programs we had, it was really just race was a factor amongst a bunch of other things that included probably more weighted on grades, maybe in some schools, although many are no longer requiring SATs. but also weighted on geography and economic status. Both, we may want a certain percentage of people in that we provide financial aid for, but then we want a lot of people who we know can pay, cash. I mean, so there's a lot of those things. Folks, that ends the phone call portion of our program. As you can see, I have turned that down. Let's read a couple IMs and we'll get out of here. Toma Flink, Happy Newsday Tuesday, folks. According to Eric Weinstein, the best way for humans to survive the AI apocalypse that Eric seems convinced is about to happen is to unshackle next-level human beings like Elon Musk. About 30 seconds later, Eric described Peter Thiel as a genius who is better communist than most communists. Also, Emma and Bradley, I forgot to mention in my ESVN IM that in March, players for Wales national rugby team threatened to go on strike over contract negotiations for their home game against England. Sam's tight pants. Can't wait for Meatball Ron to bitch out tonight when Tapper's first question is whether he thinks Trump was wrong on 1/6 and says some goofy stuff like, well, I wasn't there, so I don't know if it was good or bad. Austin Blue. Oh, Jim Jordan thinks an appointed official can be removed for office for lying or the appearance lying to Congress. Excellent. Let's start with the appointments to the Supreme Court. Manny, about strike. Why can't actors, writers, and others in the film industry start their own studios and make their own streaming service? Also, it's Manny like Armani, not Manny. Mani, like, I see. Okay. Because there's a huge amount of money and that
Capital.
It takes to invest in these things. But you will see, you will see independent films that get made. Even during the strike, I think.
Yeah.
Very low budget.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is like those guys are rich. You need to claw that back. You can't just say like, oh, we're going to go independent now. Well, now that you've already exploited us to these giant sums of hundreds of millions a year.
Yeah.
Yep. James from Houston, these people are literally demons running our state government. It's infuriating that he and Ted Cruz are probably going to remain in power for at least another term. So you're speaking about Greg Abbott, without a doubt.
Yeah.
All right, 4 more of these. Dude divides. Kowalski is right on his take on NATO. Sir Douglas. Well, I normally enjoy your show. I read that one already. Golden Oyster Cult. Jesse Waters looks like he always knows the current market rate of roofies. Joe Snuffy. Exactly what Kowalski is saying. I'd love to call in about the cluster munitions issue as well, as I think nearly on the left is dramatically missing the mark on what they represent in the conflict.
I'm sorry. I don't agree. I think that we can. I am on the side of arming Ukraine, but I think we can draw lines in terms of what kind of weaponry that we are going to sell to them, and it's not just the left saying this kind of stuff. Tim Kaine has raised alarm bells, among other, Chris Murphy, others in the Senate. It's not an extreme position in any sense.
Fuxatani Phil. Folks, I need a new razor and I can't find your Henson code.
It's Majority Report, I think. Right? Also, I now have 2 people in my life using Henson shaving.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. What is that code, Bradley? We will get that answer for you in a moment. And
yeah, just hensonshaving.com/majority.
Oh, majority. Sorry.
The Cringler. If Dora won't debate Sam, maybe he'll debate Emma. He seems dumb enough to underestimate her even after he laid waste to simple Tim. And the final IM of the day. Eddie Munster. Speaking of fascists in Italy, their government has begun erasing LGBTQ parents from birth certificates. Story on Yahoo and Daily Mail. Oh. Bradley, Matt, Emma, great job today. Folks, we'll see you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bar. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my